Эй, всем привет! Мы продолжаем наше путешествие за Уралом, Behind the Urals, книга американского рабочего о городе Стали. Это американский сварщик, который приехал в начале 30-х годов по зову сердца, в буквальном смысле этого слова, помогать Советскому Союзу строить свою индустрию. И в 1942 году он написал об этом книгу.
Page 11, second paragraph. The door opened, and two sheepskinned figures entered the room. "All right, you guys, how about a fire?" said Kola, without looking up. "We can't heat this whole room by electricity." The two riggers pulled their scarves down from around their noses, took off their gloves, and rubbed the frost from their eyelashes. "Cold," said one to another. "Nada zakurit." They approached the electric stove, produced rolls of dirty newspaper and a sack of makora, a very cheap grade of tobacco, and rolled themselves newspaper cigarettes as big as Havana cigars. I rolled one too, and we lit them from the stove. The riggers were youngish and had not shaved for several days. Their blue peasant eyes were clear and simple, but their foreheads and cheeks were scarred with frostbite. Their hands dirty and gnarled. The door opened again, admitting a bearded man of 50-odd, so tall that he had to stoop to enter. "Good morning, comrades," he boomed good-naturedly. "Hey, Kuzmin," said Kyola, looking up, "make a fire, will you? If the super comes and finds the place warm and nothing but the electric stove going, he'll raise hell." "Who ever heard of the super getting here at 6:30? said one of the riggers, rolling his enormous cigarette to the corner of his mouth. Kuzmin smiled good-naturedly. "Okay," he said, without paying any attention to the rigger's remark. He opened the door of the big iron stove. Seeing that he actually intended to make a fire, the two riggers joined him, and within 5 minutes the stove was full of scraps of wood, most of which had been taken from a pile of railroad ties outside the shanty. Kolya looked the other way while Kuzmin poured a pint or so of gasoline from a burner's apparatus onto the stove. One of the riggers tossed a match into the ash pan. A dull explosion made the windows rattle, and then there was a roaring fire. Workers came one after the other now, and gathered around to warm their cold hands, faces, and feet. At about 6:40, Ivanov, the rigger's foreman, came in, shook hands with Kolya, and picked up the telephone receiver. He was a broad-shouldered, middle-aged man with a deeply lined face and a quizzical expression around the corners of his mouth. He was a Pole and a party member who had fought 3 years in the Red Army and worked on bridge construction jobs from Warsaw to Irkutsk. After an unsuccessful attempt to call the storehouse and try to get some bolts he needed, Ivanov hung up and took Kolya by the arm. "Come on, let's look the job over," he said. The two foremen left the shanty together, Ivanov tucking a roll of blueprints into his pocket and swearing good-naturedly at the cold, the storehouse manager, the foreigners who projected structural steel with 1.5-inch bolts, and the telephone operator. In the meantime, the iron stove was nearly red hot, and the men gathered around in an ever-widening circle, smoking and talking. "I don't know what we're going to do with our cow," said a young fellow with a cutting torch stuck in the piece of ragged rope that served him as a belt. He rubbed his chin sorrowfully with the back of a rough hand. His blue peasant eyes were looking through the shanty walls, through the blast furnace foundation, through the stack of unerected trusses, across 200 miles of snow-swept steep, back in the little village he had left 6 months before. "It took us 2 weeks to get here," he said earnestly to a bewhiskered welder sitting next to him. By the way, we don't say bewhiskered. "Walking over this steep with our bags on our backs and driving that goddamn cow, and now she's not giving any milk." "What the hell do you feed her?" asked the welder thoughtfully. "That's just the trouble," said the young cutter's helper, slapping his knee. Here we come all the way to Magnitki because there was bread and work on the new construction, and we find we can't even feed the cow, let alone ourselves. Did you eat in the dining room this morning? Yeah, I tried to. In a clean-cut looking fellow, only 50 grams of bread, and that devilish soup that tastes like it was made of matchsticks. He shrugged his shoulders and spat on the floor between his knees. But then, if we are going to build blast furnaces, I suppose we have to eat less for a while. Sure, said the welder in broken Russian. And do you think it's any better anywhere else? Back in Poland, we hadn't had a good meal in years. That's why our whole village walked across the Soviet frontier. It's funny, though. We thought there would be more to eat here than there is. Wladek, the Polish welder, was one of many who, dissatisfied with their lives in Pilzdowski, Poland, and afire with enthusiasm from the socialist construction, word of which came across the white Russian countryside through the Polish border guards and censors, had left, taking only what they could carry, to throw in their lot with the Soviet workers. When Wladek spoke, all the workers around him turned and listened with interest. "Tell me," said the young worker, "why don't you make a revolution in Poland?" "Don't you think they're trying?" said a burly rigger. "Why, the Komsomol in Poland is a wonderful organization." Wladek wrinkled up his nose. "Yeah, but it's not as easy as it sounds," he said quietly. "They put you in jail, they beat you up, and vot, tebiania. Try and make a revolution." "Don't tell me," said Kusman. "Our regiment revolted on the Galician front. We killed our officers. We got comrades out of jail and went home and took the land." At this point, a young, boisterous, athletic-looking burner burst into the room and pushed his way to the stove. "Boy, is it cold," he said, addressing everyone in the room. "I don't think we should work up on top today. One of the riveters froze to death up there last night. It seems he was off in a bleeder pipe, and they didn't find him till the morning." "Yeah," said everybody at once. "Who was it?" But nobody knew who it was. It was just one of the thousands of peasants and young workers who came to Magnitki for a bread card, or because things were tough in the newly collectivized villages, or fired with enthusiasm for socialist construction.